just discipline. So a lot of the information that we're going to be talking about today is based on some of Dr. Bailey's research, as well as some of the additional research that I have done. And with any training that I do, I practice it myself in the classroom to see what works, what doesn't work, etc. I also own 3 schools here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I know what it's like to be the director, to be the teacher, to be the parent even, and dealing with aggressive situations. So we're just going to jump in there, and if you have any questions or comments about anything that we go over, make sure that you type in your question, and Lori's going to help me relay that information and everything. Okay. Now you have the handout that I posted for you, and it's an article that I wrote that I call Move from Fear to Love. We're going to talk about a lot of the information that's in that article, especially the 3 rules that we follow, the 7 techniques that we follow, but not everything that's in that article or everything that we talk about today is going to be in the article. Not everything in the article we're going to talk about today. So I like to provide a lot of additional information in addition to what we're talking to. Okay. You know, I kind of get this really big pet peeve when people want to label children as disrespectful or misbehaving or quote-unquote a bad child. And I become, over the years, I've become a big advocate for the child, that we just don't give the kids a big enough break. And the one thing that I want to focus on with this particular topic is getting everyone to understand that everyone has unmet needs. All right, children have unmet needs, adults have unmet needs, we all have unmet needs. And what we really need to focus on is identifying these unmet needs and connecting with the individuals and working with the individuals rather than labeling them, stereotyping them, and pushing them aside. I just got an email from a provider last week that was having a difficult time in the classroom, some classroom management issues, and she immediately kind of focused on this one little boy and all of his problems, and he happened to be a staff child and happened to, in her opinion, have all of these diagnoses that have not been diagnosed. And, and I kind of went back to her and I said, you're putting the spotlight on the child, but the problem is not with the child. The problem is with how the 2 teachers are dealing with the situation. So we got to kind of move away from blaming everything on the kid and instead looking at how we can meet these needs, the needs within the child, the needs within the teacher, all of these type of things. So, the first slide that I have out here is, any outburst that either a child or an adult has is a psychological response. It's the brain downshifting into our survival state. And when the brain downshifts into our survival state, we go into a fight or flight mode, okay? And there's a lot that goes on whenever the brain is downshifting and a lot of information that it passes through, which we're going to try to talk about some of this stuff during today's webinar. Now, what I like to, or the way I like to describe this is that when the brain downshifts into its survival mode, which is where you start seeing the aggressive acts, we downshift into the unconscious brain, which is what I like to call you lose your common sense. All right? And I think that as adults, we have all been there where we get emotionally hijacked, we get frustrated, we get stressed out, we get upset, and we say or we do things that we regret later on, okay? And we can probably all relate to that. Well, the same thing happens with the child, okay? They go into their fight or flight mode. They downshift into their unconscious brain, and they say and they do things that they regret later. We call those aggressive acts, all right? We call those tantrums. We call those fits, all right? And that's the first thing, I really want y'all to do is to put yourself in the child's shoes, all right, and understand what they're going through at that particular time. I'm going to go ahead and say this because it's really critical as we go through the rest of the material today to really put a strong focus on this particular point. When working with aggression, all right, again, whether it be a child or an adult, you have to be able to see the world from that individual's point of view, okay? And the only way you're going to be able to connect with them and to help them and to help meet their needs is to see the world from their point of view. This is probably one of the most challenging things for early educators, but it's one of the most important things that you've got to do, all right? So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now, many of y'all have been through a lot of trainings where you understand the hierarchy of the brain, all right, but I'll go ahead and very quickly go over this. The front part of your brain is your frontal lobes, all right? This is your executive state. This is where most of your, logical thinking takes place. So everybody on this webinar right now should be in their executive state. Then you go down to what's called the limbic system, which is the emotional state of the brain, okay? And you can kind of see that on the screen, the blue area right there. This is where a lot of our emotions come from, all right? And then, of course, the survival state is in the brainstem. This is when you go into that fight or flight, all right? Now, the other thing that I like to describe right here, and whenever you look at the picture that's on the screen, right in between the brainstem and the limbic system, so right in between the red and the blue, is kind of what we call our CD-ROM. And this is where all of our experiences are stored. From the time you're born until this moment right now, every experience that you've had is stored in your CD-ROM. 99.9% of the information that's stored in there you probably have forgotten about. You don't even realize it's there, but it's there. It's important to know that because when we are in our executive state, we're in our logical thinking, and we get upset or we get stressed out or we get frustrated, okay? We get scared. Our brain will downshift into the emotional state and down into the survival state. So we downshift into the brainstem. But what happens is when we downshift, we also pass through that CD-ROM, okay? So the way a child or an adult, the way a person responds or reacts to a situation is based on their experiences, okay? Which again is why it's so important that you see the world from the child's point of view, okay? So that you can understand those experiences and it will be able to help you meet the child's unmet needs, okay? So there you go. Now, hopefully during today's webinar, we're going to talk about some contributors to aggression, 3 rules when dealing with aggression, 7 beliefs to hold on to, and we'll kind of talk about how to handle these things, all right? For time reasons, I did take out a lot of the statistical data on contributors to aggression just because we only have an hour and we, can't spend a whole lot of time on that. I will go ahead and even though I took this out of our presentation today, I did want to share with y'all these days one of the biggest contributors to aggression is overexposure to screen time and children being spending way too much time on tablets and on phones and on laptops and on computers. And I can do a whole 1-hour webinar just on this topic right here. But the neuroplasticity in the brain, the rewiring of the brain that happens whenever you're overexposed to screen time is mind-blowing, literally mind-blowing. And it's just messing us up so bad. That's a huge contributor to aggression right now because the brain is being rewired in a non-natural way. Like I said, I can spend a whole big length of time just on that. But the one point that I wanted to make is that actually last week when we were leaving the leadership symposium, when we were in our Uber on our way to the airport to fly back to Texas, I heard on the radio that the APA, the American Pediatrics Association, released new recommendations for children and their exposure to screen time. Of course, they still maintain children under the age of 2 should not be exposed to any screen time, but what they changed is children 2 to 11, they have reduced the recommended amount of screen time to 1 hour a day. And that it used to be 2 hours a day. Now they've gone down to 1 hour a day. And of course, as soon as I heard that, I immediately started Googling and pulling up the articles. And the information was outstanding. But especially when we talk about the contributors to aggression and how this is affecting us, that was huge right there. And I was so happy to see the recommendation go down to 1 hour. All right. Kind of going back, if you want to go back to this picture on the hierarchy of the brain, do you see the executive state, the green part up there, the frontal lobes? One thing that we know is that when children are overexposed to screen time, it causes the frontal lobes to not fully develop. And when the prefrontal lobes do not fully develop, it causes the child to stick in an adolescent state, all right, an immature or adolescent state. So I bet a lot of y'all can agree that you've got a lot of kids out there in your classrooms that are very immature for their age, or emotionally they're not where they're supposed to be per their age. And this is a big indicator of it. So pretty interesting. All right. So let's kind of talk about some of our rules when dealing with aggressive individuals. And one thing I love about this topic is that it's so applicable to not only the classroom, but just center management as a whole. You know, we can take all of this information and apply it to our parents, working with our parents, working with our teachers, working with our children, working with your spouses, you know, everything. So rule number 1, to effectively manage aggressive children, you must unhook yourself, okay? You've got to understand that the tantrum or the fit that they're throwing is not about you. It's about them. But oh so often we want to make it about us. How many times have y'all heard a teacher say something like, you know, look how you're making me act right now. You know, look how you're making me, you know, talk, all right? You're making me so sad. You're making me so angry. I bet a lot of y'all have heard, you know, those type of comments. Well, if you notice, the common denominator in all of those statements that I just made was me. You know, look how you're making me act. Look how you're making me feel. Look what you're making me do. Well, when you say things like that, you're giving the child complete control of the situation, all right? You're basically telling the child that they have control over you, all right? And you don't want to give away your power, especially to a 2-year-old, you know? I want you to think about a teacher in a 2-year-old classroom that is saying things like, look what you're making me do, look how you're making me act, you're making me so sad. You know, this is a 2-year-old who already is discovering their independence and their power and their abilities, you know, and they realize that they can also do all these things to you. Well, a 2-year-old's going to take that and run with it. You know, they're like, oh, wow, I'm making her feel this way. Let me see what else I can do, you know. So it's pretty cool to them. But just keep in mind, no one can make you angry without your permission, okay? No one can make you upset without your permission. And no one definitely can stress you out without your permission. So you have got to learn to unhook yourself and stop taking it personal. One of my favorite new things to say is, you know, stop being a Q-tip, all right? Q-tip meaning quit taking it personal, all right? And we often do that in the classroom. I went ahead and threw this slide in here about temperament. And, temperament is your built-in wiring from birth. And it is a pattern that is consistent over time. And you can see up here on the screen, again, the 9 characteristics of temperament. All right. Now, the reason why I threw this up here and understanding and working with aggression, it's important to know about temperament because your personality, or an individual's personality, is made up of 2 things. Personality is made up of temperament plus experiences. All right? Temperament plus experiences equals your personality. All right? So when you are working with an aggressive individual, and the question comes up from time to time, can you change someone's personality? All right? What do y'all think? Can you change someone's personality? Well, let's take a look at what the 9 characteristics are up here. Some of these items, absolutely, you can change. You can influence the quality of mood. You can influence and change the activity level, their sensory threshold. These are all developmental things, okay? Now, can you change an experience? No, you can't change an experience. What has happened to that child has happened to that child. There's absolutely nothing you can do about the past, all right? But this is very important to also talk about when working with aggression, because we cannot change the past. But what we can do is create more positive and meaningful experiences for the child to add to that CD-ROM, okay? So that way, again, whenever they do downshift and they get emotionally hijacked and they pass through that CD-ROM, hopefully they're going to connect with a positive and meaningful experience rather than one of the negative or disruptive experiences. All right, so it's important to understand that one right there. I tell this story in a lot of my trainings. Many years ago, probably 20 plus years ago, I worked at a school in East Dallas. It was a very low income facility, had a lot of CPS cases, things like that. But I had this 4-year-old girl, little bitty petite 4-year-old girl, that was throwing a tantrum one day and hitting all the kids and hitting the teacher. And I went back into the classroom and I bent down at her eye level, and and I tried to talk to her and said, it really hurts when you hit the other children. And she looked right at me and hit me right in the face, just balled up her fist and hit me right in the face. And of course, I immediately had to stand up and take a step back and breathe. I wanted to reach out and strangle her little neck, but I wasn't ready to go to prison yet. So I had to kind of calm myself down and do some active calming. But it was really interesting because when she hit me, I looked at this child and she was like ready to fight. She had her fist up, she had that aggressive look on her face, and she was ready to rumble. And and you sit there and you think about these situations, and I think about that situation with this little girl a lot. What experiences has this child been through in her life that at the young age of 4, she was ready to fight? I mean, it was eat or be eaten for her, and kind of breaks your heart a little bit. But that's also where you've got to look at these situations as opportunities, okay? And I talk about this a lot in several of my sessions, is that, when children act out in the classroom, that's a cry for help, all right? They are trying to communicate with you, and they are trying to tell you, teacher, I need you. I've got a problem, and I don't know how to tell you about it, so I'm going to act out, all right? Anytime a child acts out in the classroom, it is an opportunity to teach, all right? Anytime a child acts out in the classroom, it's an opportunity to make a difference, all right? The other thing that I love telling teachers all the time is that, all behavior is a form of communication. Okay, all behavior is a form of communication. And like I said, they're trying to tell us something's wrong and I don't know how to tell you. So, I like to play this little role-playing game where, how many of y'all have had an experience where a teacher talks to a parent and, or even maybe a director talks to a parent and says things like, your kid is so out of control, your child is so disrespectful, your child is so defiant, you need to do something about your kid, blah, blah, blah. All of these negative statements about their kid. And I'm sure that we've all witnessed or been part of similar conversations. Well, let's do it again. Based off of what I just said, let's have that conversation once again. And it goes kind of like this. Hey, Mom, hey, Miss Buxton, Lori has been trying to communicate with me all day long. Hey, Miss Buxton, Lori has been giving me opportunities to teach all day long. Lori has been giving me opportunities to make a difference all day long. Doesn't that sound a lot different? All right.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about myself right now.
But if I was Lori's mom, I'd be going high five, awesome. Lori's doing some good things in the classroom, and this is a great learning opportunity. But that's basically what we're telling the parent, So keep that in mind, too.
Hey, Tim, we have a question real quick.
I love questions. Thank you.
Okay, so the question is Teresa, and she said, how do you get the parents on board with limiting screen time and working with their child's aggression? Because they're oftentimes, and I agree with her, they're oftentimes the worst violators because the video options become the babysitters.
Yes. I have found that taking the parents' iPhones and getting a baseball bat and smashing them works really well. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. I actually wrote a trifold. I wrote an article on overexposure to screen time, and we turned it into a trifold that we pass out to not only the parents here at the school, but also parents in the community, and just trying to educate everybody on overexposure to screen time and the damages that it has. And again, not only on children, but adults too, So it's just going to take educating. And I don't know if you are aware of this, but, electronic babysitter is an actual term now, all right? It's an actual term. And so, yes, they're glorified babysitters, and that's what it's turned into. But it's really difficult to get the parent to see all of this because that electronic babysitter makes their life easier, all right? And actually what we see is that electronic babysitter allows them to spend more time on their screen, okay? So whether it's, the article that I wrote, but there's tons and tons of articles out there, especially the new recommendations from APA. I would definitely print that up and send it home, in your weekly folders or however you communicate with your families, and just really push that, that education. Now,
Can I throw a nickel in, Tim? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I have controls. I'm sorry. But I would recommend that if you're going to do something yourself or use something that Tim has produced, that where you can point to how it will improve the quality of the parent's life, because what Tim just said is so true, that the reason that they let these kids use the technology to the degree they do is because it frees them up to do whatever it is they want to do. And if we can point to how it impacts quality of the parent's life, we're liable to get more buy-in. The nicest way I know to say this is that they really aren't as concerned, to put it mildly, about what the quality of our life is in the classroom. It's a very egocentric time. And so if whatever you put out, if you can point to this is going to make your life better at home, then you're liable to get better buy-in.
Yes, it's the WIIFM, the famous radio station. What's in it for me? And we always want to apply the WIIFM and to any communication that we have with our family. How is this going to make your life better? How is it going to make our life better? Now, I'm also going to say something that may not be a popular comment. And so, Lori, if you want to fire me from the webinar, you can. that I'm going to go ahead, because I've got to passionately throw this out there too. It's very difficult to teach our families about overexposure to screen time when we are also overexposing the children within our classrooms. Okay?
Yes, preach it.
So I am a very anti-computer screen time early educator. You will not find any screens in any of my classrooms. I believe that our children 0 through 6 need hands-on sensory-related activities and not pads, iPads, or screen time or computers and those type of things. So we don't want to be a hypocrite about the situation either. So, okay, I said my piece. Let's get back on subject. All right. I went ahead and threw this in here. Pain concentrates your consciousness in one area. Aggression stems from the perception of excessive pain. Okay. Now, I want to remind you that pain can be both mental and physical. All right. Of course, obviously, when we're physically hurt, all right, we're going to be in a bad mood. You're going to show more signs of aggression. But the main thing is that when a child is struggling mentally, or when they've got mental or emotional issues, that's going to be concentrated, and that's where the aggression is going to come out. But this also, this whole slide right here goes back to the unmet need of the child. All right. I'm going to jump forward because I don't know how much of the material we're going to get through, and I definitely want to make sure that I say this. Children cannot meet the needs of other children until their own needs are met. Okay? That is huge right there. Children cannot meet the needs of other children until their own needs are met. Okay? So a lot of times when we're dealing with aggression in the classroom, we expect the child to, you know, meet the needs of all the other children in the classroom, but they can't do that unless their needs are met first. All right, and they've got to have the basic skills needed to meet those needs. Okay, and that's an important one also. So it's a whole process. You know, I teach a CDA class, and I'm actually teaching it via webinar every Tuesday and Thursday. My CDA class that I taught yesterday was all about empathy and teaching the children empathy, and it was a fantastic class, and I really enjoyed it and everything. But I've been thinking about it like all night last night and today about how important it is that we do teach children empathy and how to care for one another and to understand each other's needs, and it's all related to this same topic right here. All right, let's kind of go over our 7 successful beliefs. The first one we already talked about: no child can make you angry without your permission. No child can make you sad, upset, crazy, happy, all right, without your permission. So you've got to, you know, unhook yourself, like we said. Whomever you believe to be in charge of your feelings, you have placed in charge of you, okay? And I don't know about y'all, but I do not want a 2-year-old to be in charge of my feelings. That's pretty scary right there, all right? And then the other thing is that, and the reason why I point this out is because when we work with aggression, okay, 9 times out of 10, when you've got an aggressive situation in an early education setting, you end up with 2 aggressive individuals, the child and the teacher, okay? Because the child allows the teacher, or the teacher allows the child to emotionally hijack them. And now you've got a child in the survival state, and you've got a teacher in the survival state. And then the teacher normally goes and gets the director gets frustrated with both parties, and now you've got director in survival state, okay? And what you've got right there is just a big old mess, all right? One of the most important skills needed when working with aggression is composure, all right? The adult in the situation must maintain composure. So incredibly important, because remember, you are the role model, and the child is looking at you on how you're going to respond or react And it's up to you and your active calming techniques to download to that child and help them calm. All right. So composure is like I said, one of the most important things right there. I do a whole training on the top 10 secrets to classroom success, and that's one of my top 10 secrets is composure. All right. You've got to have it. But we talk about power and where is your power going. All right. You know, responsibility is the key to reclaiming your power, and a blame is the escape. All right. And we live in a blame-based society right now where we always want to blame someone else for our issues. It's the child's fault. It's the parent's fault. It's the government's fault, you know. Stop the blaming. All right. Stop the blaming. We've got to accept the situation that we've got and make the best of it. All right. Remember that when you go and do your early voting over the next couple of weeks. All right. That we got to stop the blame game. But this kind of goes back to that email I was telling you all about at the beginning of the webinar that I got from a provider this week. I mean, classroom's out of control, and she just wants to blame a particular child. All right. Well, let's look at all parties involved. All right. We got to look at everything. Okay. I've got a big, important slide coming up next. Are y'all ready? Hold on. If you're not sitting down, you need to sit down for this one. All right, strap in your seat belts because this is a biggie. The number one problem with self-esteem in children is the lack of self-control in adults. That one is huge. All right. So many times.
The hills have come alive with the sound of music, Tim. The hills have come alive with the sound of music.
The hills have come alive. So many times we create this trap in the classroom that if you look in the mirror, you start seeing that the adults are modeling the exact behavior that we're trying to prevent the children from doing. Or when children act the way that they act, we get very upset, but we start seeing they're acting just like us. Okay? And so that self-control, that composure, once again, is, again, key. It's key to working with aggression and dealing with aggression is that you've got to maintain control. You know, this is one of the 10 principles of discipline that we often talk about is that adults must see themselves as role models, all right? When you've got an aggressive child, especially when you start talking about instrumental aggression or hostile aggression, that child is seeking a role model, okay? Secretly, they are looking for someone to guide them and to mentor them. But especially when you get to the hostile, aggressive state, the child knows that whenever they become hostily aggressive, the adult in the situation is probably also going to become hostily aggressive. There's no modeling, all right? So that's where when we talk about structure, we talk about routine, we talk about rituals, okay? Structure, routines, and rituals is not only going to be good consistency for the child, but it's going to help with the self-control with the adults. All right, let's throw some conscious discipline techniques at you. When we talk about active calming, we want to be a star. All right, smile, take a breath, and relax. I like to use this one. I usually teach it to say stop, take a breath, and relax. All right, keep your eye on the child whenever you do a star, okay? Because again, you're modeling to them. But whenever you have a child that starts being aggressive, you stop, you take a breath, breathe in through your nose, exhale through your mouth, and relax. But keep your eye, you know, eye-to-eye contact with the child while you're doing the star technique. The reason why I say that is because you'll see that you will download your active calming techniques into the child. And it's amazing that whenever you stop, maintain eye contact, stop, take a breath, and relax, you can literally see the child melt, all right? And they start calming down too. It's amazing how it works, all right? I've even started using the STAR technique when dealing with parents and dealing with teachers, that before I have a difficult conversation, I'll look them in the eye, I'll stop, take a deep breath, relax, and then move into my conversation. And it works. It's pretty cool. All right. Now,
Tim,
when I'm on my, yes.
A question just came in, and I see there are a handful of other questions that we can grab at the end, I think, but this one is specific to what you just said. This is, what if you have a child that will not maintain eye contact?
Okay. That's a good question. That's a very good question. You cannot force that eye contact, all right? You want to allow the child to make that eye contact when they feel comfortable, all right? Now, one of the main reasons why we see the lack of eye contact in a lot of situations is that there's a lack of trust and respect, okay? And when we talk about connections, connections on the outside build connections on the inside. When we talk about connections and forming relationships, which are all critical when working with aggression, you've got to build trust and respect first, all right? Now, you cannot force trust and respect onto anyone, an adult or a child. This is something that has to be earned. Now, for that child that does not want to make eye contact, all right, it's very important for that child to know that they are safe, okay? And you actually need to say this. In fact, I encourage teachers to say this like 17 times a day. They tell their classroom, my job is to keep you safe. And I even have the children respond, okay, whenever the teacher says, my job is to keep you safe, the children will respond and say, my job is to help you keep us safe, all right? It is important for the child to know that they are in a safe environment. Once they feel safe, they start trust, okay? They start trusting individuals. They start respecting individuals. You'll start seeing the eye contact. But it's got to come in those layers right there. Now, when I talk about the child must feel safe, okay, remember, you've got to see the classroom, you've got to see the world from the child's point of view, not the teacher's. All right, we can sit here right now as administrators and as teachers and say, oh yeah, our classrooms are safe. I know our classrooms are safe. You know, I make sure all the outlet covers are on the outlet. There's no tripping hazard. There's no damaged toys. Yes, and all of those are safe items, but does the child feel mentally safe? Okay. Now, the child that refuses to make eye contact, you also got to keep in mind that there's both issues within the school and issues outside of the school. All right, there's something else going on in that child's life that is influencing this lack of eye contact, and these are normally things that we can't do anything about, or we have very limited ways of dealing with this. And a lot of times I hear administrators say things like, well, I know these parents. They're the two sweetest, parents. Mom and dad are so awesome. They've tried this, they've tried that, All right, and that's probably the case, but again, I'm going to say this, and it's not a very popular thing to say sometimes, but it's the truth, and the truth hurts. Mom and dad, they put on a fantastic dog and pony show when they're dropping off and when they're picking up and when they're communicating with us in conferences and when they're enrolling their children. It's a big old dog and pony show. But in some situations, what we see is not what's actually going on at home. All right? Now, again, there's very limited things that we can do about that. So what I like to, enforce with the teachers is that the 10 hours that the child is with us, or the 4 hours that the child is with us, whatever your program is like, we are going to create a safe and nurturing environment for that child while they're with us. All right? Because remember when we talked about the power and you can't give away your power? You don't want to get emotionally hijacked over something that may or may not be going on at home that you have no control over. So let's focus on what we do have control of. What we do have control of is what takes place at our program. All right, so that was a lot of information to answer that one question about eye contact, but it's all very important right there. Remember that this child that is avoiding eye contact, they need structure, they need routine, they need rituals. Structure, routine, rituals. All right, and eventually you'll come around to them. And the main thing is let them know that they are safe. I had a little boy, actually just recent at one of my schools that was throwing a tantrum. And it was one of those that he had to be removed from the classroom, and it was, got moved into the hallway, and there was teacher, there was director, everybody involved. And I finally got up and went out there to try to help with the situation, and I just bent down to the child, and I just told him, I looked at him in the eyes, and again, he didn't want to look at me, but, I said, hey, you're very angry right now, and that's okay. I said, it's okay for you to be angry. And I said, I'm here to make sure that you're safe, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you. All right? And I kind of took him by the hand, and we took a walk around the school. We did some active calming techniques, and I said it 20 times, you are safe, and I'm here to make sure that you're safe, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you. And it's okay for you to be angry, all right? And the director and the teacher was looking at me like, what? No, it's not okay for him to be angry. And I'm like, yes, it is. Don't we constantly tell children to express themselves and to express their emotions and to understand their emotions? We're constantly encouraging children to do this, but then when they do it, we get frustrated with them. It's okay for him to be angry. It's okay for me to be angry. It's okay for you to be angry. All right, now we've got to teach the self-control part, but the key word right there is we have to teach and mentor and coach the self-control part. All right, so awesome. Lori, was there another question, or was that all for that one?
Well, there are a couple of questions out there. Let me throw them in there, and you can decide whether you want to field them now or at the end. Two of them are almost the same, so I'll kind of make it into one question. What do you do when the child's so out of control, hitting friends and teachers? Parents are going through a divorce, they're very angry, and they're concerned about the safety of other children and teachers. And then on the same kind of thing where no matter they know the rules, and they're being reminded constantly, but they just are very aggressive towards peers. So that was one question. Then the other one was they wanted to know if you would be willing to share, or if there's a way for you to share that brochure on technology.
Yes. Okay. Yes. All of that. Yes. Awesome. Okay. So I want y'all to remember that in order for a child to master a skill, it has to be practiced 2,000 times in context. So during your question, you said something about they know the rules, they know the expectations, they're reminded of it, constantly. But again, the skill must be practiced 2,000 times in context in order for the child to get it. I also want to remind everybody what the word discipline means. There's a big difference between discipline and punishment. Punishment is to hurt, to humiliate, to make them feel bad. Discipline comes from the word disciple. And we know that disciple means to coach, to mentor, to teach, to learn. All right? So we've got to remember that we're working with young children here. And they've had a very short time on this earth. And when we are born as humans, the only thing that we're able to do when we're born is cry, which crying actually is a form of communication which is needed to build relationships. So one can say that the ability to form relationships is the first survival skill that we are born with. All right, So when working with a lot of these situations, you know, and that actually kind of goes to our next one, relationships are important, okay? Now, the comment came up about the child that is being hostily aggressive. They're endangering themselves. They're endangering the other children. Now, you know, like our good friend Mr. McGuckin always says, safety is always your trump card, all right? And, of course, over everything else, keeping everyone safe is the most important thing. But we also have to look at the situation where the child is throwing a tantrum and look at the unmet needs that are going on with this child and how can we help them. All right, so we don't want to turn their back. The other thing, this is something that I talked about in my CDA class yesterday on empathy, is that when a child becomes hostily aggressive and you start fearing that the teacher and the other children are in danger, when the child starts throwing the tantrum, all of the other children in the classroom witness this, okay? We've got to understand that there is a learning opportunity for all parties involved. There's a learning opportunity for the child throwing the tantrum, and there's a learning opportunity for the children that are witnessing this. All right, we tend to forget about them. All right, but there's a lot of confusion that's going on with the kids that are witnessing this. You know, are they safe? Is this person safe to be around? And why are they acting the way that they're acting? So making sure that you're going back and working with the other children, you know, what do you think Johnny was feeling whenever he picked up the chair and threw it, you know? How would you feel or how would you handle the situation if it was, you know, if it was you? And again, that's going to create that empathy. That's going to be able to, the child's going to be able to connect to the emotions of the other child, which is going to create that, they're going to be able to relate to them, which is going to create that sense of safety. And then whenever the child that is the one throwing the tantrum feels safe in his environment, not only with his teachers, but with his peers, he's less likely to throw the tantrums and create an unsafe situation. All right? So, again, you've got to look at the whole situation right there. Now, the other thing that in the question that Lori just asked me, the child's throwing a tantrum because he's going through a divorce at home and he's very angry, he's very confused. Even though you need to know that to be able to properly care and educate the child, I want y'all to wipe that off the chalkboard, all right? I want y'all to take that out of the equation, because what happens is that when we know that this child is going through a divorce and they're confused and they're angry, we tend to start using that as an excuse. All right? Remember the blame game? We're going to blame it on something. Well, the child has unmet needs, so we're going to blame it on the divorce. All right? Take that out of the equation so that it doesn't block you from trying to help the child in their unmet needs. All right? Sometimes I think that too much information is damaging. All right? We need to know the basics, but sometimes I don't know if we need to know everything, because we tend to let that hijack us. All right? The article that I've got on overexposure to screen time, if you go to my website, timthetrainer.com, and remember my name is spelled with a Y, you can go to online trainings and you can actually download that article. You don't have to pay for it or anything unless you just want to do the online training. But the material you can access at no charge, and I don't mind, you know, y'all taking that and doing whatever you want to with it. So I like sharing. All right. All right. So again, the motivation to behave comes from being in a relationship. So of course, one of the other rules that we have right here is to spend time with the child. I just want to remind everyone that 5 minutes of one-on-one time, or 5 minutes of focused play with each child each day reduces power struggles by 50%. So whenever you do have a child that is showing a lot of aggression, they need you to spend time with them, okay? That's so incredibly important, all right? So that kind of goes back to the connecting with children wires the brain for impulse control. I love this quote right here. Our children need our presence, not our presents. All right. So we don't want to substitute that time with materialistic items. All right. So that's important right there too. All right. One last thing. I know we've only got 7 minutes, and I'm sure there's some more questions, but I wanted to make sure I got to this one right here too. There are only two states of being. Everybody, right now, everyone that's on this webinar, every child that's in your center right now, they are either extending love or calling for love. Okay? At every point, you're either extending love or calling for love. So most of us are in an extending love state. All right? We want to meet expectations. We want to please. We want to do the right thing. But often we do fall into the calling for help or calling for love state, all right? But what happens is that whenever a child starts calling for love, we tend to label them as being disrespectful or misbehaving or throwing a tantrum, when in reality they're calling for help, all right? And that's when you want to say something like, you know, Susie took your doll away from you, so you pushed her down and called her a bad name. When Susie took your doll, that was very frustrating. You didn't know what words to use, did you? So you pushed her down. All right. Understanding that they don't know what to say, they don't know how to react or respond, and that's where the coaching opportunity comes in from us. All right. The other thing I want to make sure that I talk about right here, and again, it's in your handout that I gave you. There are no bad children. Okay, there are no good children out there. We just have children. All right, and so and even when you go around your classroom and you're like, oh, Lori, you're such a good girl. Oh, Erin, you're such a good girl. And you say those things, but then if I don't say, Dimitri, you're a good boy, if I tell Lori and Erin that they're good, but I don't tell Dimitri, what does he automatically assume? He's bad. All right? And so kids are smart like that. We just have children, we just have adults that have unmet needs, and it's our job to help them with that. All right? Hey, Lori, I think we're going to need a part 2 to the webinar.
Hold on.
I didn't even
get
I
think you're right.
I didn't even get to the 3 different types of aggression and working with the aggression and all of that good stuff. But are there any other questions?
Real quick, yes, I'll throw a couple of questions, but real quick, by a show of hands, would you guys be interested in us scheduling a part 2 to this in the next couple of weeks? Everybody get your little hand thing over here. Hands up, hands up, hands up. Hands up. Okay, I see bunches of hands up. Okay, let me see what I can do since I'm the event person. I imagine I have some pull in that area, and I see lots. Oh, please do part 2. Yes, they're asking. All right, so I will work on setting that up, and we'll keep you guys looped in for sure. But I also want to say, I'm down for a part 2, but I would. This has been so helpful. They want more. So we definitely want to do that, but I want to encourage you guys to consider conference as well in April, because he's going to be doing this and as well there, so that would be an opportunity for you guys to even dig in a little deeper. So yes, Tim, let me ask you a couple of let's see. Somebody wanted to know, well, someone asked about sharing your slides, but if we're going to do a part 2, then I think we can manage some of that way. I don't know about your slides and what have you. Is there a way to print your slides? That's what Angie asked. And then the other question that we were asking is more about specific behaviors, like the ones that bite and choke. And I think you kind of talked about that. I mean, yes. It manifests itself in 100 different ways. It can be throwing chairs and biting and what have you. And remember that those are symptoms of the problem. And I think that's what Tim's really trying to say. I mean, you can fill in the blank with any number of manifestations, but
Lori, can I say something?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the biting, the hitting, the kicking, those are all just actions. You've got to figure out the factor that's causing the child to be aggressive. What is the unmet need? that is causing the aggression. And we do have to teach children that, words are more powerful than hands that hit, feet that kick, and mouths that bite. All right? But again, those are just actions. You've got to find out what is the unmet need. And I did throw up one last slide up on the screen that was really important too, that you cannot stomp out this energy, okay? So we want to transform it, all right? The child's going to have the energy. We just got to put it in, in a positive form and let them express it in a positive way. It's not going to go away, all right? We just have to transform it right there, and so that's pretty important. But I can talk more about that if I'm giving a second chance.
Okay, so here's the, yes, I guess we'll give you another shot at it since you're okay at it. So, okay, so here is my proposal. There were some questions that came up for me on this whole Part 2 thing. How will you know when it's going to be? Well, first of all, I'm fixing to tell you because I just made an executive decision, and so I'll be able to answer that question for you. Well, I have to check with Tim first, but I think I know when we can do this. But the other thing that I want to say is that when you registered for this webinar, it asks you for your contact information, at least an email address, and so we can grab all of that information and we'll make sure that we email you out to let you know when it's going to be. My proposed repeat is going to, Tim, I don't know if you can grab your calendar real quick if you can look. I was actually going to do this webinar on the 16th, do a webinar, but I'll give you my spot and I can hold because I'm not going anywhere. And that way we can, Miriam does the next one, so I can't do them back to back, but I can put you in the next available webinar slot, which is November 16th.
Okay, yes, I'm available on that day.
Are you? Okay, so for all of you that are on the call right now, you can plan on November 16th, noon, the same time today. Does that work for you, Tim?
Yes, ma'am.
The 12 Central Time? Okay, so we'll plan on doing 12 Central Time, okay, for Part 2 of this webinar, okay? And that takes me, I'm going to switch screens real quick because I want to show you guys a couple of things. Tim, first of all, I want to thank you very, very much for just being such a treasure trove of information and being so generous and sharing it, because I know from my own personal experience how important it is for my development. And so I want to thank you on behalf of everybody for letting us just pick your little brain, because it is truly, truly a gift. And thank you for being so willing to come and do a Part 2 and just answering on the fly. We really appreciate it. So I had a question about certificates. Yes, everybody will get a training certificate. If you are currently a member, an active member of the Association for Early Learning Leaders, you'll get an email in the mail within the next 5 business days, is what we try to tell you, just with a link to go and download your certificate through the website. If you are not currently a member, I would encourage you to consider it, and I'll tell you about that in just a second. But if you are not currently a member, we will send you an email within the next 5 business days with your certificate attached. So either way, member or non-member, you'll get your certificate within the next 5 business days, and it's for clock hours, not CEUs, but for clock hours. So you will have that. And we do give those out for each webinar. That's part of the point, is to make sure that we're able to assist you in getting your professional development hours in as well. So next webinar, now this is going to be changed a little bit because we just made a fly decision, but the next one on the docket is next week. Actually, I have the wrong date on there. It's the first Monday in November. It's the 9th, sorry, November 9th. It's so hard to find good help, isn't it, Tim? So November 9th, not October 26th, which was today. We're going to have Miriam Dressler, and she's awesome. That one's going to be the holidays are coming, and they're going to help with celebrating the holidays with an inclusion perspective with Miriam. She's awesome. And then the Wednesday, November 16th, is not Lori anymore. It is going to be Tim with Part 2 of our time today. So he's going to do Part 2 of dealing with aggression. So I'll update that. And again, we'll get that email out to everyone as well. So plan to be there for that. And that will be, now Miriam, let me tell you this, Miriam is going to be, if you are not currently an active member of the association, that the one on November 9th is a paid webinar. If you're not a member, it'll be $29. If you are a member, all of our webinars are free, which is a really great reason to become a member. I'm telling you, there's some good stuff in the package. And I'm going to tell you, this is the member toolkit. It's only $115 for the entire year, includes every webinar we do. And if you'll look on your toolkit or your little screen over here, the little dashboard bar, you have the handouts listed there. There's the handout from Tim if you didn't get that via email, but I also included a PDF that has the member toolkit informational sheet, and it'll tell you all kinds of stuff that includes and how it can help you in your leadership. So download that and look at it, and please consider a membership toolkit. It really isn't just about being a member of something, although that's really important, having the camaraderie and the support and resources in each other, but there are also very practical and tangible tools that you guys will really find beneficial in your day-to-day life as a leader. So I encourage you to check that out. And then I want you, again, that's conference April 27th through the 29th. We are going to have Tim and all kinds of wonderful things. We're having this at Disney, and we're going to have the Disney Institute as our keynote, and they are outstanding. You can't get access to this information except through a conference without spending a tremendous amount of money. So if you guys have the ability to come to the conference, I really encourage you to look at it. Somebody asked me about scholarships. We are actually working on that now, and we'll keep you guys looped in on what we're going to be able to do as far as scholarships are concerned. So absolutely, I will keep you looped in. And then for save the date, we just had our leadership symposium. Tim was just talking to you about, we were just in Fort Lauderdale last week. We'll save the date. Just stick it on your calendar for October 12th and 13th next year, because we're going to San Diego. Going to be awesome. And again, it's just a way to really fill up your pockets and fill up your heart, fill up your toolkits so that you're ready to go back and do business. And then don't forget to check out the Early Learning Marketplace. These are vendors that have the stuff that we need at discounted rates, readily available to help you with what you need. So we work really hard to find people that have quality products, quality experiences, to take advantage of the Early Learning Marketplace as you're making purchases and looking for resources. It's a great little tool for you guys. So again, I encourage you guys to be with us again on the 16th for part 2. I want to thank Tim again with all my heart for being such a wonderful, generous leader in our field. If you guys have any questions, you can email me directly at Lori, L-O-R-I, at earlylearningleaders.org. Again, Lori at earlylearningleaders.org if I can help you, serve you in any way. Or you certainly are always welcome to access all kinds of information and resources via our website at earlylearningleaders.org. I thank you guys for your time, for your great questions, for your excitement about having part 2. Be sure and check out everything we have to offer. Call us if you need us, and have a tremendous, tremendous rest of the week. We are so thankful for all that you do and all that you give for our field. God bless you guys.